Well, thank you for being here, even if I can't see you, for this virtual summer national gathering. Since I am at home and at ease, I like to think of you in an equally comfortable state. We will limp along and deal with our current circumstances, although we would by far prefer to be together. I'm going to talk to you about the return of the hero. Since we're exploring practical applications of theosophy, I plan to consider the essential theosophical concept concerning us as spiritual pilgrims. And in doing so, I'll use some ideas from a movie that I saw, Frozen 2, and some tarot cards as illustrations. But the bottom line is that our spiritual journey has meaning and purpose. As I said, my title is The Returning Hero. And my dear David told me that I had the wrong title. In his mind, the hero is one who fights for the right at great personal cost and then comes home as the conquering hero to ticker tape parades. That is true, but I also see the hero as one who endures through good times and bad, but keeps their spirit up and maintains an inner trust in the right, the good, the true, and keeps on trying. Using this definition of the hero, can you think of somebody you consider a hero? During this terrible pandemic, I think we've all come to regard our healthcare workers as particular heroes who return again and again to the battlefield at personal cost, great personal cost. Then there are the postal workers, the package deliverers, the grocery store workers, any number of people, who knows who else. In this particular time, we are seeing many heroes. The first person that I thought of in considering a hero is my mother, whom many of you knew as Butter. She was so dear and thoughtful, thought of other people at all times, and yet she was tough as nails through difficult times. She was a great role model. What made her and others heroes? What traits do they hold in common? Think about it. At the top of my list is really considering others first, doing something for others. And then there is persistence, courage, high ethics, being authentic, being real. You can probably add a few more, but you get the idea. Also note that the making of a hero is a process of growing in stature as our hero returns again and again to meet the new challenges. Now, do you realize that you are a hero? You are the hero of your own journey. As a human being, you probably suffered loss or grief or pain, and you're still standing, metaphorically speaking. You may be lying on the couch, but you are still trying. And you're even listening to me because you are still walking your path. You are still trying, fighting the good fight. You are making a conscious effort to take the next best step. Before, we were so limited in our activities because of the pandemic. David and I saw a movie, Frozen 2. Now, that's an animated movie. It's for children, but it struck me as a great allegory for us all. Throughout the film, the message is repeated. When you seem defeated, take the next best step and do what is right. In Frozen 2, the two sisters, Anna and Elsa, are catapulted into an adventure, a journey to save their community, to save the lives of friends and family. Elsa is touched with magic and seems to represent the inner spirit. Her inner knowing prods her to sense that something is not right and keeps calling her into the unknown. Anna, on the other hand, represents our ordinary consciousness, much more focused on everyday, mundane world. But through love for her sister, she is drawn to support and follow her, just as hopefully we will be drawn to follow our higher nature. In the long adventure, it ends up that Elsa, the higher consciousness, can take them only so far and then is frozen into inaction. Now Anna has to exercise her mental faculties to figure out the specifics of what must be done. Then she has to use all her energy, planning, strength, courage to bring about the resolution to save their community. In the end, the two sisters realize that it takes the two of them together to heal the land. Each needs the other in order to be successful in their efforts. They need the grounding of action and the inspiration or insight of understanding wisdom. Isn't this true of us? We need both. Throughout their adventure, the same motto is repeated several times. When you seem defeated, take the next best step and do what is right. That is the requirement for our hero's journey, to take the next best step and do what is right. Or as the Mahatmas have told us, all they ask is that we try. And to do so, we need both the love and openness of spirit to acknowledge our inner promptings, but we also have to function with mind, emotions, and body fully engaged. It takes both our grounded focus and intuitive insight. This pandemic is definitely taking all of our faculties to deal with. We need to maintain an upbeat spirit of connectedness while we are so separated. And we need to be able to keep our energies and spirit up as well as take whatever actions we can. Our task as pilgrims is a traditional theosophical concept. Madame Blavatsky tells us that each of us, as a spiritual spark of the divine, is required to take this hero's journey. It is a pilgrimage through many life cycles as we grow in our ability to let that universal spirit, God, or by whatever name we call it, to shine the light of connection and unity through our being. In this way, we express our true nature and finally, according to her terminology, attain independent, conscious existence in harmony with God or the All, our divine source. In her great work, The Secret Doctrine, Madame Blavatsky tells us that there are several essentials for understanding life. The fundamental proposition that particularly applies to our thinking today is that we are pilgrims, sparks of the divine on a journey to rediscover and reclaim our divine nature. As a Christian, I might express it as fully embracing our Christ nature within. The way Madame Blavatsky explains it, she says, the obligatory, required pilgrimage for every soul, a spark of the universal, undefinable, absolute, divine source through the cycle of incarnation. And she goes on to say, in other words, no purely spiritual divine soul can have an independent, conscious existence before that spark, and that's us, has acquired individuality, or I might say clear consciousness connected with the divine. And how do we do this? First, she says, by natural impulse, then by self-induced and self-devised efforts, checked by karma, of which we cannot do much about, but we can do the best we can within our circumstances. So in case you have ever wondered why we are here, this is it. This is our assignment. It's a major task, but we have to wake up to the understanding that we are indeed a spirit having a human experience. Our true identity is in the spiritual realms. That is our absolute reality. When we finally come to that realization, then begins our true pilgrimage, or one might say our homeward journey. We are no longer functioning automatically by natural impulse, but now we have to figure out what to do and to do it. Our pilgrimage is the hero's journey. That's why fairy tales, such as Frozen 2, speak to us so deeply. So many of them depict the journey through trials and testing, through enduring effort, and finally achieving merit. And consider our two sisters in Frozen 2. Their community is endangered. I think we can identify with that. We have had to upend our lives in order to try to protect our community. And we truly have to think of others by wearing masks. We've been told that the mask will probably not protect ourselves as much as it will protect others in case we happen to be a carrier. Life is not as it was, and we are thrust necessarily into paying as much attention to the safety of others as to our own safety. This is an opportunity like none other before to rally to the cry of following the hero path. We have had other challenges, and we'll certainly have more, but this is a unique time. This is a critical time to awaken to our connection with all people. There are no boundaries, there are no borders. What happens to one happens to all. And in the midst of this pandemic, we're confronted with the underlying injustices of racism, police brutality, economic inequality. This has long been a painful blight on our society, to which we of white privilege have often turned a blind eye. I have heard it said that white silence results in violence against our darker brothers. This has been true in the past, and sadly, it seems to continue to be so. There is a lot of truth in it. We're responsible to speak up whenever we see or hear slanderous statements against our darker family members. Our brothers and sisters are hurting, and it has gone on far too long. The total system must be changed, and we are the change agents. As heroes, we have to figure out how to right the wrongs. Our particular karmic circumstances that we are dealing with can give us some clues as to what is the next best step to do and what we can do that will be right. But we have to be aware. Perhaps even the breather of our disrupted lives that we're enduring now will draw us closer to paying more attention to the promptings of our inner or higher self. This is our chance to make a deeper connection to our purposes in our hero's journey. We are responsible for how it turns out. So now, to bring in some additional imagery, I want to share a couple of tarot cards that speak to us, that reveal some of the stages that our frozen heroines went through and that we will experience as we traverse this path. If you're not familiar with them, the tarot cards are an interesting collection of symbolic pictures, of images that have been used for divination, but more importantly, I think they have a lot of symbolism to help us explore various psychological states. I will take some personal liberty with the cards, so don't be disturbed if my interpretations may be unorthodox. Symbolism is as the viewer sees it. Take the Fool, for instance. The Fool is often considered to be the pilgrim fully prepared and master over all. However, since the journey progresses in cycles, I see the Fool as ourselves, embarking on the next phase of our journey at whatever level. Perhaps confident, perhaps ignorant of the way ahead, but ready to take the next step. And you can see that he isn't really looking where he's going. So he is taking the step out on faith. In January, we were somewhat like this fellow. Most of us thought all was well and we were doing fine. Like children, we had a natural impulse towards optimism, feeling relatively happy-go-lucky. And unless we come from dire circumstances, most of us start off like this on our outward journey. We may have some notion of our spiritual leanings, but we're generally satisfied with the world the way it is. Consider our sisters. Elsa, the intuitive one, maintains her inner connections, being always aware of the inner worlds around her. But Sister Anna is drawn into a kind of forgetfulness and is more entangled in the simple pleasures of the physical life. So she's not so aware of the impending dangers. I think most of us could identify with Anna earlier in the year. And generally, we can get drawn into the physical life and forget our spiritual aspects. Life happens. We get worried about this and that, distracted with everyday living, and we do forget our true spiritual nature and purpose. In fact, forgetfulness is our human condition. The voice of the silence tells us about this. It says, "Thou shalt not let thy senses make a playground of thy mind." We have such a natural tendency to let self-talk run around in our heads, plans, dreams, hopes, fears. They go round and round and actually keep us bedeviled. The devil represents the lower mind filled with sensory input, animal nature, keeping the couple captive. But notice how loose the chains are. Whenever the people decide to slip off those chains, they are free to do so. The devil has no power beyond our own making. This is so true. If we could just wake up to our higher nature, we could slip off these chains and overcome so much of our angst and worry and constant turmoil. But it usually takes some drastic change to catapult us forward. It may be a difficulty, a health crisis, a long-term quarantine, tragedy, whatever it is, but something shakes our foundation. Consider what we're going through now. Our whole way of life has been shattered. Change has been forced upon us. Creative chaos has come calling, perhaps through this catastrophe or just being shut in or even illness. But this is a decision point. Are we going to relapse into old habits, or are we going to begin to wake up? We may have been lulled back into an unconscious journey at some point, just following a natural impulse until this catastrophe says, wake up. I think our nation is in the tower phase. Things have gone relatively well in some years past, and our nation drifted into a kind of complacency. Now our discord and dysfunction have reached a fever pitch. We need to do things differently to make some drastic changes. The tower is a reminder that life is not always easy. Life can prod us to remember that we are more than we think. The first step is to realize that something is wrong. The next step is to explore within ourselves in order to search for answers, at least some direction for our next best step. So we finally get to a more pleasant picture. This brings us to the star. So having been shaken loose at last, we are drawn to reflect. And in our current circumstances, we are forced to have the time to reflect, to find meaning and purpose, a resolution to our issues. As a pilgrim, we can no longer work just to survive by natural impulse. But we have to figure out how to muddle through. What is our purpose? What is the next best step to do what is right? The pilgrimage now becomes, as Blavatsky told us, a self-devised and self-induced effort. This is the journey that does require the hero's efforts. We have to figure out what will be best for ourselves and our fellow travelers. We're not in this alone. We are bound together. But where do we start? How do we know what is the next best step to do the right thing? Going back to our sisters, remember that it took Elsa's connections to the inner world to carry them forward in discovering what was wrong. Just so we need some inner reflection in whatever form to give us direction. We need some way to be able to look at life objectively, to follow the inner threads of our psyche, to begin to touch the nature of our true identity, to expand our sense of connectedness with others, to open our heart in love. However we can achieve this insight, it is essential for our self-devised, our self-figured out journey, and now we have the time to do it. Stephen Heller, who wrote about the Tarot, very interesting book called The Royal Road, defined the star in this way. The meditative star delves deeply into the waters of the unconscious, into which she pours vital force. She is balanced between solid and liquid, physical and emotional poles of being. The guiding star of the higher self shines above, reflected in the pool of unconscious emotion. It is extremely important to follow the star of meditation. But don't be discouraged. Not everyone can sit still and contemplate their navel, as my dear David says. The inner search can take many forms. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was famous for working so extensively with death and dying patients, said that she had difficulty trying to meditate and claimed she couldn't do it. Yet one day later in her life, she realized that her intense focus on her dying patients was actually a kind of total self-forgetful meditative state. That was her form of meditation. So it can take different forms. For other people, it might be the love of nature, or contemplating God, devotion to Jesus, or a saint. There can be many valid ways of approaching one's inner nature, but the point is there has to be some way to connect with one's inner being, something that can be a true, sure anchor, a guide, a lodestar to keep us on track, to help us find our way. Even recognizing our weaknesses can draw us deeper into within. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who was a famous Jungian psychologist, put it this way: be proud of your scars. They have everything to do with your strength and what you've endured. They're a treasure map to the deep self. So whatever path you might take to inner understanding, it is imperative that you find your deep self, your path to your inner self. So after we find our inner connection, what next? In our story, Elsa, the intuitive self, joins forces with Anna, the conscious physical self, and together they work for the healing of the world. We have to have that connection, spirit and action, in order to survive this current situation and whatever else befalls us. Take a look at the magician. In my opinion, this is the culmination of the pilgrim journey for us mere mortals. This is the returning hero. The magician stands with all the elements at his disposal on the table. It's hard to see, but it includes the cup, star, wands, and swords, which represent emotions, mind, body, and spirit. So he's conquered himself to some degree at each level, but he is still in the world. And he holds the wand aloft, drawing on the inner strength available through the higher self, but only to direct that energy towards the healing of the world, creating the flowers of good deeds at his feet. No matter how learned we might be, nor how into self-reflection, if we are not grounded in service, we are sounding gongs and empty vessels. The magician symbolizes this crucial aspect of our pilgrimage. His energy shows us that we are waking up and understand that we are connected with all, and that we grow through service, directing our energy for the good of the whole. We might not get there all at once, but in our pilgrimage, we do what we can to imitate this image. Like the two sisters, combined, we can draw in our inner direction while acting in the world for good. To the degree to which we can do this, we gain blessings. And what's that blessing? The power to help others. HPB, in her description of the road we traverse, steep and thorny though it may be, tells us that for those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling. And that reward is the power to bless and save humanity. This is our goal, and this is our reward. As sparks of the divine, our destiny is to manifest that divine nature, that Christ spirit within. Our purpose is to make the world a better place. And in doing so, we unfold that nature within ourselves. It is said that whenever we make that inner Christ nature more fully manifest, we ourselves add a drop of healing to the world. HPB tells us in the Key to Theosophy that it is an occult law, moreover, that no one of us can rise superior to our individual failings without lifting, be it ever so little, the whole body of which we are an integral part. So if we can't do anything else, we can at least work on our own failings for the benefit of the world. Yet, however much work we do, that is only the beginning of our quest. As Clarissa Pinkola Estes, a famous Jungian psychologist, has written, when a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt, but that's not what great ships are built for. We do have to turn our energies outwards to work for others to be effective. Also note that we have to respond to the need at hand, whether physical or spiritual, and in the case of so many injustices, both are involved. HPB says, speaking of our responsibilities, it is no concern of ours whether our help benefits a person in worldly progress or spiritual progress. Our first duty is to be ever ready to help if we can, without stopping to philosophize. Perhaps this speaks to some of us who love to theorize but not act. We are living through the most trying time that most of us have experienced. Our lives are topsy-turvy. We can't be together, to work together, to serve together, to share together. We can't be at this meeting together. We're isolated except for our precious internet connections. What can we do? In a way, we are frozen. We've all had to press the reset button for our lives. The suffering around us is immense, but yet there is the hidden blessing. Our busy schedules have come to a halt for the most part, and so now we can prepare our hearts for re-entry in a new way. Clarissa Pinkola Estes also wrote, "Do not lose heart. We are made for these times." For years, we have been learning, practicing, in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. And she goes on to remind us that we are not alone. When she writes, "Look out over the prow. There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the waters with you. In your deepest bones, You have always known this is so. We are a part of so many souls who are awakening to the needs of this particular critical time. We can make a difference even now. Look around and see. This is our purpose, to make a difference for our fellow beings. Each one of us is on our hero's journey. If we are here in this conference, we're in the process of waking up, searching our hearts, and determining what we can do now and into the future. Following our own Elsa inner spirit and bringing our practical Anna into action to take the next best step to do what is right. You are the hero returning to these times, to this place, to make a difference. What are you doing? What can you be doing? There is no task, however great, that banded together, even over the airwaves, we cannot accomplish. We are all adding to a flotilla in the inner worlds. Souls are coming together from every direction. We can work to rectify social and racial disparities. We can work on economic injustices. We can understand and change our own attitudes. We can share our insights with others. As we meet together and have discussions together, we can make a difference as we grow together. Or we can contribute to food banks. We can be kind to grocery workers and the medical staff. And we can even be kind to people who do not take this pandemic as seriously as we do. We can be responsible about social distancing and wearing masks. We can treat with greater respect our planet, Mother Earth. I'm sure you come up with many ideas using your own talents and your own circumstances. How do you envision structuring your life going forward into the future? Consider carefully and commit yourself to be a more conscious pilgrim. When we do that, banded together, we can make major changes. With our commitment and actions, we can collectively change the world. We are all in this together. We are returning heroes. The Theosophical Society, and this means you, is a flotilla of heroes returning. Take heart. You were born for this moment. Do your part. Let us, each and every one of us, take the next best step and do what is right.